While you're all getting settled, you can see that there's some stuff about the sign-up sheet here. The sign-up sheet itself, so we want to hear what you have to say. So we're hoping that there's going to be a lot of people who want to talk. There's a sign-up sheet up in the front here that represents what we're trying to follow. So we want to hear from a lot of people. So if you want to have an opportunity to talk, please, we encourage you to sign up on the sign-up sheet that's at the end of the table, and then we'll walk through everybody who wants to speak at the public hearing.
Donna, feel free to tell us if we're following some procedural rules wrong. So keep us going. So this is a public hearing.
Just turn the sound down.
You have to get the sound right. Are we okay now?
No.
How about now? Is it balanced?
Jack the sound up.
Okay, how about now?
That's better.
Okay, keep the feedback to a little.
Please, up.
So this is a public hearing. It is a public hearing of the selectmen's choice to have a right of first refusal, to exercise our right of first refusal under Chapter 61A. So it is a public hearing. It is not necessarily a debate. What we're hoping to do is to listen to everybody. And we won't be voting as a board until next Thursday to put on the warrant, if we decide to put it on the warrant. So that vote will be next week. There's a chance that based on timing, we might have to vote to have a town meeting on Monday. But we could vote to have a town meeting on Monday and still choose on Thursday not to advance it to a warrant. Just the timing forces us, I believe, to make the decision about whether or not we're having a town meeting earlier in the week. So the real decision that's meaningful is next Thursday, where the select board will vote to put on the warrant. So this specifically, we expected this to be a full room, and thank you, everybody did show up, so it is a full room. So we did set up some guidelines for the questions, and that was just because we wanted to make sure everybody had a chance to speak, and it wasn't necessarily monopolized in one direction. What we don't hope to do is to rebut everything you guys say, everything that's said. You know, what we want to do is we want to listen to what you have to say. That you feel free to ask questions, and we will address them, but we will keep our questions short. We will write them down, and we will make sure that we get your answers back to you, and we'll find a way to post it on our website, on the town's website. Is there anything else Donna need to do? Thank you. For the record, this is being recorded, and it is not live. It is going to be running on the cable channel on a tape loop. I'm not quite sure exactly what the frequency is, but it is going to be up. Okay. So, in case anybody doesn't know, the property, so here we have Bay Road going out this way, Bridge Street coming out here, Cutler Road, and the Pirie Property is this 86-acre piece right here. And that's the town hall, town cemetery, and the high school. This is a close-up aerial of the property. You have two houses at the front that importantly are not part of the right of first refusal that was given to the town. We then have a small house here, some fields, stables, this is Pierre's house, new barn, and pastures going back to the Miles River. And you can just barely see the Miles River there. Main house, another view of the main house. There's a beautiful, beautiful Sears catalog house on the property. There are two of the older stables. This is an antique stable. It's a little over 100 years old, I believe. This is a Molinato stable. This stable is right behind the other one, the one behind it. current stable now, looking back to the pasture. Okay. So why are we considering this? The landowner has an agreement, an existing P&S to sell 86 acres for $39 million. $3.9 million. Sorry. Let me turn so I can look at the facts as I speak. Okay, it's not feedback. The Pirie family has had the property in 61A for many years. And the state of Massachusetts, as part of Chapter 61A, gives towns the right of first refusal to match any purchase as long as the use is being changed. So if Mrs. Pirie was able to sell the property to someone else that was going to run it and not change the use, we would not be here. Mrs. Pirie's development is to have approximately six lot subdivision out of this in A&R, and as a result of changing that from farmland to housing, even though it's a small footprint than what we're looking for, it does trigger the right of first refusal that we have from the state. It's important to note that if we buy the property, if the town buys the property, Mrs. Pirie would get the same value as what they're selling at the property now. So, it is the same money to them either way. The Chapter 61A is designed to be a very quick process. So we only have 120 days when we were told that there was a P&S to exercise our right of first refusal. During that, we had that 120 days to decide whether or not to call a town meeting. Because this would involve the purchase of land, it requires a 2/3 vote. So it's not just a 50% plus one, it's a 2/3 vote at town meeting. And if we choose to vote favorably, then the town has to buy the property in 90 days. There are many other towns that have exercised their rights under 61A and their rights of first refusal. In some cases, they do it in advance under an appraisal process, and in many cases, they do it by matching the right of first refusal. This is not uncommon. Right next to us in Wenham, Wenham had a 61A property for the Dodge property. The Dodge family had it under contract to sell to someone who wanted to put more homes than were there in the boulders. Wenham assigned their right of first refusal using 61A to the Hamilton Wenham Land Trust, who then immediately sold it to Windover at the boulders for building the boulders, and that property now generates about $300,000 a year for Wenham. So the idea that's been floated that we are being aggressive and the mere act that we're considering to exercise our right of first refusal is an act of aggression is not true, because it's done throughout the state, and it's been done in Wenham, just to our south on 1A, and it's been done in Ipswich, just north of us. Now, the Ipswich property hasn't yet been built out, but New England Biolabs has it as a 100,000 square foot future building site. So that's a 2.5 acre building site. It gives them the right to expand. So what the Pirie developer, and this is Upper Cross Development, the group that has the property under contract, is they actually have under contract, including the abandoned house that you see at the front on 1A, as well as the house right next to it. We, by state law, had to know the value attributed to this piece. So we asked for clarification of what that value was in the course of, because we originally had the right of first refusal paperwork given to us that included those two properties. When we asked for that clarification, those two properties were carved out because they were not subject to 61A. And as a result, the 61A rights that we have are on the remainder. So the developer plan is to have an approximate 30-acre lot for Mrs. Pirie's house. Have about a 5, almost 6-acre lot along the cemetery. This is the Sears catalog house up in front. If you're driving on 1A, you have to look really hard to see past this house. So this is practically invisible if you're on 1A looking in. There's a field here where there's another lot. There's a lot here that includes the 2 stables and the greenhouse. And then there's this lot 5 where there's an existing, the new, beautiful new stables is in back here. So those are the 6 lots. There's the existing house on lot 3 and the existing house on lot 6 that the developer plan is to continue with. So, you know, they intend to maintain those 2 houses. They intend to build 3 to 4 new homes. Some of them are valued at 1, and some of them they think will be worth 3 or 3.5, $3.1 million. From our estimations, we think that they're going to generate about $170,000 a year to the town, which is phenomenal. That's a really nice number. So I don't. We have a different view of what could happen, but this is it's still not a bad plan. Importantly, the road and all open space will be private. They've talked about protecting the existing equestrian trails, but they haven't yet indicated how that would happen. Importantly, from our perspective, there are no housing options that meet there. So, I don't know. Okay. So, we have identified over the last 12 years a whole series of objectives in the town. We had the master plan 12 years ago. We've had the downtown charrettes. We've had all of the town-wide discussions for all of the bylaw discussions that we've had. So we had multiple times at the cluster bylaw. We had multiple times discussing the senior housing bylaw. We had the overlay Great Estates bylaw. We've had inclusionary housing bylaw. These are discussions we have had as a town coming out of the master plan for the last 12 years. We have put in place a series of bylaws to help us match those objectives. And the housing objectives that we're looking to achieve are affordable community housing. We want to have downsizing options. We hear again and again how people need to have more moderate price houses. We don't necessarily need more, $800,000, $900,000, $1 million houses. We need smaller houses for people, smaller price point houses for people to move into. We have had, I'd say every single selectmen's meeting over the last 12 years has also had discussions about how can we offset our rising tax rates and lower our tax bills. So generating more revenue is a real ongoing objective for us. And then we have also, again and again, stated that we need to have public access to our properties and our trails. We want to have some field space to give some more flexibility for the youth lacrosse, for the youth soccer, for all the different sports that we have in town. And whenever possible, we have a town objective of trying to extend and permanently protect whatever trails we can. So our trails are being maintained wonderfully by current landowners. But they are at risk for when those landowners change, and we want to have as a town policy to permanently protect whatever we can. So as soon as we had the right of first refusal given to us, we formed a Pirie working group. We met twice a week throughout March, once a week thereafter. We met with developers and brokers and engineers, all of our land use boards. We considered a whole host of options that didn't play out. Not that they won't play out in the future. I mean, so for example, the whole idea of having the Winthrop School, having a school site there and sort of doing something with this property, that doesn't include something else happening at this property, but we don't think it's going to work out for the Pirie property. We have commissioned traffic studies. We've visited lots of other senior housing projects and other housing projects. We tried very hard to figure out if there were any fatal flaws. We were going to tell the Pirie family very early in March. We didn't have to. We could have told them in June, but if we had identified something early on, we worked very hard to figure that out. And unfortunately, for some people, unfortunately for others, we did not see any fatal flaws. So we did not. We told them that we would continue. There have been a whole background of discussions on what's legal, what's not legal. So we'll be meeting with town council on a regular basis to go over that. And the entire working group has gotten up to speed on a lot of information. So this is not entered into lightly. So what is our concept? We want to have a complementary village use of the property. The property is about 86 acres. We're looking at putting in 40 acres of housing and having permanent trail protections, public open space, communal gardens, potentially or probably at least one recreation field. We're looking to have cottage or small style housing that has a lower price point. Because we have an inclusionary bylaw, we're going to be able to have some community housing there. Think of workforce housing for our police, our fire, our teachers, our children as they try to move back into town. So the idea of having community housing is very important. It's an ongoing goal for the entire town. The town would buy the property, articulate what our objectives are, and sell the property to a developer to carry out that master plan. So one of the developers that we spoke to gave us an example of what a cottage housing product looks like, and they actually took this lot. So this is the lot that's next to the cemetery, and they've outlined 24 houses on 6.4 acres. These are cottage style housing, and the current grandly of trees would remain unchanged. So this is what cottage housing looks like. This is in Concord. The plan, these houses are actually closer together, both across the courtyard and closer together side to side than what the development plan is here. It really is a creation of a village. Okay, so from a conceptual layout, and please, this is just a conceptual layout, there is the entire center core of the property in our concept would be unchanged. The Sears house would be unchanged. We would try to put some apartments in the antique stables, the old stables. And then we would try to maintain the guest house, the small guest house that's being used as a farm office now. So no change in footprint in the entire center core of the property. This whole back half of the property would also remain unchanged. To do that, we'd be looking at 15 to 20 units there, 20 to 23 units here. Now, as we've spoken to people, depending if you sell the main house and sell the Sears Catalog house, you could do a lot fewer houses there, and still have the economics work. So the idea is this is probably the most it would look like. So what would happen is you would have permanent conservation restriction across the back. And that would be necessitated by any of the bylaws that allow us to cluster this. You must put at least 50% of the property in conservation restriction or in some form of permanent conservation. And then we're thinking a soccer field up front, or maybe a soccer field in the connector, so either one of these front fields. From a town perspective, you could lay out 2 miles of trails throughout the property. These would be public trails. Right now, there's a beautiful trail that sort of follows this line. So this horse trail is existing right now, and this horse trail is existing, and you would sort of expand and create a few more trails as you look through. But you could get easily 1.5, maybe even as much as 2 miles of trails. And they're not necessarily just horse trails. So there would be walking trails or hiking trails or cross-country ski trails. So we've done the traffic study. The traffic study said that this road is no different than any of our other roads that go on 1A. It's very difficult to go northbound when the high school and the middle school is in session, but otherwise it just behaves like any other road in and out. Most importantly, safety and stopping distances were adequate. For those of you that are familiar with the property, the existing driveway is 19 feet wide, and the right-of-way is 40 feet. So for those of you that think it's a tight turn, it doesn't necessarily have to be a tight turn in the next configuration. And just as importantly, Bay Road, right at that spot, is also 40 feet wide. So if you think, oh, it's going to be tight turning in, it's like Bay Road turning into the Bay Road. So it's not as tight as you might think. We have had lots of questions about water and utilities, and the town has plenty of water capacity. Authority is plenty of water pressure for that part of town to accommodate many hundreds of hookups, not just the 40, 50, 60 that we're envisioning here. And from an ecological point, for those of you that care, these types of houses use a lot less water as a footprint than a conventional, 1 acre lot that do, because you don't maintain lawns and so on. We currently have, all of our bylaws require that the utilities be underground for this type of subdivision. That would be true as well here. So one of the things we've had people ask is, why don't we develop downtown? And again, people say this sort of thing, this sort of density belongs downtown. Well, we don't have a lot of land downtown. In case anybody's sitting on a large lot, let us know. But you can go downtown from Railroad Ave all the way out past Linden. In that direction, you won't find any open land. You can go out Asbury and you'll see a little bit of land off between there and Linden and Mead, not a lot. In the other direction, probably the only open land in downtown of any note is the property that we're sitting in right now. So to give you an idea, the economic impact of the shopping center, and I apologize for those of you who have heard this from me before, is the shopping center is valued at $5.5 million. We get $94,000 in tax revenue from that property. Right? So those of you that want to generate and save the town budget by building more downtown, we would have to build many, many shopping centers to generate the revenue needed to make a meaningful impact on our budget. So we project the tax revenue at this property to be well over $400,000, and some of the developers that we're trying to, they want us to have even higher value properties, and we're saying no. So we're trying to hold it down to this, but it is this could be a sizable financial component to what we're doing. Let's see. So one of the things we've been asked to do is to project out our net revenues over time. And it's pretty clear that the development plan, I thought that was a zero cost, that's $100,000. So the development plan goes up to somewhere under $200,000, between $170,000 and $200,000. So that's sort of a band that we can look at on our view of what the development plan has. And very importantly, and it's I think on this green sheet a whole bunch of places, is theirs never goes negative for the town. Right? So that's important. So I think there's no doubt that this red line is less risky than the line that we're trying to embark the town on. We know that, we recognize it, we hear you. That said, our negative number, it might be 100, it might be 110, 120, some number down here, and that's going to be per year, and it might even run for 2 years. And the really awful case, it will run for 3 years. So that could be $200,000 or $300,000 that it would take for us to put a stream of revenue in place that would be about $450,000, $270 at least over their plan. And guess what? Because we're building in stages, it won't take us the full. We're saying we build out in 5 years, and maybe someone's going to say it's 6 years, it's 7 years, but it's still going to be, however long it's going to be, it's still going to be at a point where we're going to cross over the 150, 160, 180, even the 200,000 or so that is pretty quickly. We've been asked to look at what the range of net outcomes are. I've been told to change my vernacular, so I did for this slide. And so if we permit fewer units, we get less revenue, but still substantially above the plan being proposed. If we lose a year in permitting, or someone decides to sue and sort of mess around with the timing, then it changes a year. But it still ends up being very quickly going over and crossing over the development. Now these continue on for many years, right? So that amount of gap is real. You could have a slower absorption, so instead of building out that quickly, which is 25% per year for 4 years, you could go even slower. You could actually do it in different phases. So instead you get to a certain amount of revenue in place, you then do a second phase. So the point being is that in all of these cases, you end up higher than their plan substantially. And in fact, meet their revenue projections pretty much on even. So many people want to know this slide. And so we've taken the revenue projections and we've dropped them in to our calculations on our median household income. So this is on the 395 median household income. And it stabilizes about $140, $150 per household. And then the Pirie developer plan is probably about $50, $60 per household. But it's still positive. I mean, I don't want, they still have positive revenue to us. We just have a much larger number. So how much will it cost us to buy the property? The purchase price is $3.9 million. We anticipate $100,000 in legal costs and acquisition costs. When we did the closing costs for the patent property, it was like $30,000. So the legal costs are not likely to be much greater than that. The acquisition-related legal costs, if people sue us, then we could have higher costs. But one of the things we've seen is that it doesn't have a lot of sensitivity to the return on the town. We will be using bond anticipation notes to pay it. Importantly, that means we don't have to pay any interest on those notes for 2 years, maybe even a third year if we wanted to. We can use some cemetery expansion funds because we're hoping to expand the cemetery, create some capacity there. We have a lot of flexibility to use CPA funds. We might want to use that for some of the affordable housing, the community housing. We might want to use that for some of the rec pieces, the open space pieces. And then we're also hoping to have a small amount of short-term rental from the house and the barn for the small stuff it takes for us to do it. Where we get our money back, so we spend $3.9 million out. We're anticipating developer land purchases, and we've spoken to 5 developers at this point that produce this type of housing. And we're very reasonable as far as what we're anticipating. And then one of the choices is to sell the main house and the Sears house, which is oddly enough exactly what the development plan is to do that. And then 3.9 million to the town becomes something less, something 2.2, 2.3, some number like that. Suddenly you're looking at the town buying this for $2 million, $2.5 million. We get our money back a lot sooner, and we can still have all the open space protected. So we have some options still ahead of us. People have asked what our backup plans are, but basically we can revise the RFQ, the request for qualifications, or the request for proposal, and then rebid it. We certainly can rezone the property, or we can just sell it exactly as Mr. Pirie is doing right now. So as the backup plan, we have a P&S. We know the property is worth $3.9 million. I've got to believe that the town would be able to, 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now, if the town was collectively fed up, we would be able to sell it for $3.9 million. We would lose the carry costs in the meantime. But the opportunity that it could create is really, really exciting from a housing perspective, from a permanent open space sales perspective. I'm going to jump over this, but that's important. A bunch of people have asked, hey, what's our business plan? Well, our business plan is to own it just long enough to make sure that we have a very clear, articulated set of objectives, work with some consultants to help us make sure that we have an RFP that matches that. And then issue the RFP, select a developer to execute their vision. So yes, we will be involved. Yes, the town is taking a step, but for the last 12 years, we put bylaws in place, and we're not meeting our housing objectives, and we're not meeting our revenue objectives by just waiting for developers to do our plan. So we do not intend to be in the development business. We are anticipating that a homeowners association will be in charge of the roads, will be in charge of trash, will be in charge of all the things that the homeowners association do. So this would be a private way, it would not be subject to town. We would probably take responsibility for the field and the access to the field piece. In order to do this, you would have to have conservation restrictions, and so more than likely the town and the developer would find a nonprofit that would administer the conservation restrictions. I'm going the wrong way again, sorry guys. So how will the town ensure that we get exactly what we want from the developers? Well, what we do is we define in an RFQ or a request for qualifications or a request for proposal exactly what we want. we define what range of units we want, where we think they would be suitable, what sort of road infrastructure we expect of them. We would articulate what the community housing obligations are. We would define what type of shared septic system we consider. We insist on homeowners association to cover services. We would have lots of design and aesthetic details and models that would help us understand and articulate. So it would just give us an ability to evaluate what the proposals are. So what's the timeline? The timeline is, right now, we're right here, May 16th. The next critical date is the warrant hearing on May 23rd, and that's where the selectmen decide whether or not to go forward. Then we have a town meeting on June 11th. And guess what? There's another opportunity for the town to have a town meeting vote on it, and let me jump to it, because we have the projected timeline. If the town buys the property, we would buy it in June. We have 90 days in which we have to close. We would issue the RFP, and there's a possibility that we would start working on the RFP as soon as the town meeting closes. So these dates could all move up 3 months if we start working on it right away. But then we have to review the RFP, and we would actually enter into a P&S with the developer or developers. Now, guess what? We have to have a 2/3 vote to sell the land. So the town meeting has an opportunity to say they like the plan or they don't like the plan. So this is not something where some back room is going to design something and you guys are all going to have to live with it. This is a case where whatever plan has to happen is going to have to come in front of you, and you guys are going to have a chance to say yes or no. And if we do it right, it will involve you along the way, so nothing's a surprise. And we won't be on the 120-day. This 120 days has been hectic for us, and it's been hectic for you guys. Everybody's been mobilizing at different rates. We're not under that same gun once we own it. So we can actually design it, work with people, have the right meetings, make sure that we do it right. So, but then we'll have special permit applications by the developer. Special permit will then be issued. So we're looking, at least 2 years before we see the construction. A summary of the significant differences. We basically are doing this because we want housing options. We are looking at it for revenue as well. We are looking for public access to open space. That's sort of a community value that we appreciate very much. We want to encourage that. And we have a need for recreation fields. The beauty is, some people have said, why don't we have a recreation field at the Patton property? And we may still do that. But the important thing about recreation fields here is the JV teams and the people who can't get on high school fields now can just jog over, have their practices, and jog back. No transportation, no buses. It's much, much easier for the school system to access these types of fields in the afternoon at this property than even going out to the Donovan Fields or going to Patton Park or going out to the Patton property out on Asbury. So, the value of the recreation fields there have a greater bang for buck.
Great.
Hi there, I'm Scott Mattern, one of your selectmen. I'm going to help facilitate the public hearing part. So this is where we want to hear from you. Sorry about that. So this is the part where we hear, we listen to you speakers. That's the idea, is that we want to hear as much as possible from as many people as possible. Good attendance, that's awesome. To help facilitate that, you saw some of the guidelines we're trying to follow so we can get as many people to speak and we can hear what you all have to say. So there's a sign-up sheet that people have already signed up to. I have it here in front of me. If more people want to speak, pass that back down the other way. If you want to speak, put it down in front of Charlie. And if you want to add on to here, please sign up. We want to hear from everybody. And we want to get everybody on the list. If you want to speak again, then we'll commence again if there's more things that people want to have to say. So thank you all for being here. Mark, thanks for the presentation. The Pirie Working Group is
been hard at work trying to respond to this opportunity that's in front of us. We also thought as a select board that it'd be important that you hear from some of the key boards who have also been previewing what's going on. It's just not the selectmen. There's been, the Pirie Working Group is also interacting with a number of other boards. So just a few brief statements from some of the other boards who've also been involved in this. So I'm going to call on them first. They're part of the public speaking portion of this. So first, I'd like to ask Bill Bowler from the ZBA to speak about their view of this opportunity.
Apparently there was a meeting to draw short straws, I guess. Good evening, I'm Bill Bowler. I'm the chairman of the Zoning Board of Appeals, and I am a member of the working group. First, very briefly, my personal view of the proposal. I started this process extremely skeptical. Those of you who know me would not apply the word optimist or Pollyanna to me. I kicked the tires and just came to it with a real skeptical, show me the Benjamins view. Over the course of the presentations, and I've been at almost all the meetings, I've met with almost all of the developers, I've come to support the proposal to have the town exercise its right of first refusal. There are risks. I know there are risks. I think they're acceptable risks given the possible outcome. And so, personally, I support the plan. As for the view of the zoning board did have a public meeting where we reviewed the plan. It was essentially what you've heard here tonight. Our primary focus was to see if we saw any specific zoning problems or issues. Keeping in mind the Zoning Board of Appeals will not be the permit granting authority on a plan if a plan comes forward similar to this. The board did not see any zoning problems under our, or issues under our bylaw. There would be no variances that we could see. The portions of the property that would be developed would not give the groundwater protection district or any of the, wouldn't trigger any of the oversight that the Zoning Board of Appeals has. It's in the R1A district, so it's zoned for half-acre lots. So from a zoning standpoint, the board didn't see anything. The board did, just in general, having seen the plan, support the community positives, if you will, that were put out there.
Thank you, Bill. The Board of Health might have, it's a small board, and I know they had some other meetings. I don't know if Karen's Darcy. Karen, you here? Thank you very much. She has a statement I'd like to make.
I have a note here from our chairman, Bill Lowell. We have an awful lot that we can tell you, but the Board of Health met with Mrs. Scott Madden, of the Board of Selectmen, on May 9th, to discuss potential purchase and development of a Pirie property for the town. At this time, there are no fixed plans in which the Board of Health can render a decision. Based on the board's discussion with Mr. Madden, there is no immediate obvious items of concern that may preclude continuing evaluation of the property's purchase and eventual presentation to the town meeting for approval. If the town decides to move forward to purchase the property and to direct the development of the property, there will be a need for close scrutiny of the wastewater disposal plans for the development, which must adhere to the requirements of 310 CMR, the State Environmental Code, Title 5. Given the potential size of the development and the volume of wastewater possibility generated, the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, the DEP, may have to approve the planned wastewater disposal systems per general fund, rather than the Board of Health. If the Board of Health were to review the planned wastewater disposal system, the Board of Health will provide the same level of security on these plans as in any proposed system. In addition to the wastewater disposal, the Board of Health may also coordinate with the Department of Public Works and of the town boards and committees regarding solid waste disposal and other public health issues. And this is from Linda Lowell, who's the Board of Health Chairman.
Thank you, Karen. Appreciate it. Next, Finance Committee represented by Charlie Shabakos has something to share.
Thank you, Scott. As a veteran of the...
So we can see you and hear you.
You really want to see me?
An hour, because of a half-hour presentation by the board, and then you're going to let the public talk. It's a public hearing, and all you're doing is not.
If you could be expeditious, Charlie, we appreciate it.
The Finance and Advisory Committee has been working with the Pirie Working Group and looking at this from primarily a financial view, but not just that. As a veteran of the alternative bylaw wars in this town, which have so far netted no meaningful new property tax generating projects, I've become very sensitive to the concept of character and doing anything that might change the character of this town, which is one that my family has enjoyed for years. This project achieves the multiple goals of alternative housing, public access to trails, sports fields, and a very substantial property tax generation, all of which would be virtually invisible from the street and from abutters. While we've not voted on a specific plan yet, the Finance and Advisory Committee enthusiastically supports this project. Thank you.
Thank you. That's the last you'll be hearing from us. Now it's time to hear from you. The first person who signed up was Robert Sicca. Would you like to say something, sir? No? Jim Kresser?
I'll defer Scott to later, please.
Okay. Professor Lily Wheaton.
Thank you very much. My name is Bill Wheaton. We live at 180 Bridge Street. Been there for 27 years.
Sir, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but you could be very close to the microphone so everyone can hear you.
And for the last 40 years, I have been a professor at MIT and taught real estate economics and state and local finance. So from my professional vantage today, the town of Hamilton is headed towards trouble. Its tax rate is 50% higher than the surrounding towns of Oxford, Topsfield, Manchester, Essex, Ipswich, 50% higher. Home buyers all around the area are asking, is Hamilton 50% better? 50% better services, 50% better schools, because you're paying 50% more per dollar for purchase property. The high tax rate in Hamilton has as much to do with town spending as it does with town tax-based resources. Town's spending per capita is also way out of line with the surrounding towns. If the town continues on this trend of spending and increasing the tax rate, I think property values will start to fall. Study after study has shown that when you reach a certain threshold, no matter how good the schools are becoming, no matter how good the police and fire is becoming, when you reach a certain tax threshold, property values fall. Falling property values, what does that do? If you keep the budget the same, that just requires a higher tax rate. Higher tax rate, falling property values. Ladies and gentlemen, Hamilton possibly is posed on the precipice of a slippery slope. Textbooks are filled with examples of municipalities that have gone into foreclosure and bankruptcy because they bit off more than they could chew, building water projects, building new schools, were not able to fund them adequately, had to raise taxes to the point where it lowered property values, and the lower property values then created that continual serendipity. Okay, I wouldn't worry about the town. Regarding the proposal this evening, I find it seriously flawed methodologically. Okay, there is zero discussion of what each of these developments will do for town expenditure. The focus is all upon revenue. This is the misplaced assumption that there's excess capacity in the police, in the library, in the schools. It's what I call the fallacy of zero marginal cost. In the long run, if you look at towns as they grow, if you look across towns, you increase your town population by 5%. Sooner or later, expenditure goes up by 5%. There's no free lunch. Now, it's not an exact relationship, one for one, but it's close. So I did a little more homework on this proposal. I said, using town data, the 5 additional houses to be developed under the status quo plan that the developer has, that the current owner has, would probably, with town data, result in an additional 5 new students in the school. That's $75,000 versus $125,000 annually in revenue. So the 6-unit development nets the town not $175,000, but $100,000. The 60 additional units in cluster housing are far more problematic. The state data says that community housing, there are 10 units of those, actually contain an average of between 1.2 and 1.3 students per household. So that's 12 to 13 new students. The myth that senior housing has no students, state data shows that 1 out of every 5 senior houses has a student in it. So there's another 10 students. So that adds up to 23 students. We're using the same formula. It turns out that the $425,000 gross revenue actually turns into less than $100,000 of net revenue. Ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, neither of these projects is going to do anything for the town budget. They're going to net $100,000, and they actually both come out evenly. Right? It's not going to solve the city's tax problem, and you should look at the projects in terms of other criteria. Now let me finish with one final thought. Okay? This project is fraught with risk. I teach real estate. The senior housing market of the North Shore is already overbuilt. We have the 300 units in Lennon, we have 2 projects in Topsfield, we have 2 projects under discussion in Ipswich. It's fraught with risk because the market is overbuilt. I asked the developer on the way up here, who's on my board at MIT, I said, how easy is it to sell a senior housing, which is going to cost $500,000, give or take a little, and the property taxes on that senior house are going to be $750 a month. He looked at me and laughed and said, only in Massachusetts. Okay? I don't see either of these projects as solving the city's tax problem, which I think is critical.
Excuse me,
I don't see any advantage to one or the other.
Thank you very much. Thank you for sharing that. Chris Duggan.
Well, it's a pretty tough act to follow. I wish I had known that and signed up earlier, but I wanted to make a few comments and pose a few questions if I could. A couple of comments. First of all, the prior speaker does raise some significant concerns. One of the concerns or areas of interest that I had was around the business case effectively. I have gotten a quick look at some of the underlying financial assumptions. I think that's an area that I certainly personally would want to look at in more depth, and I think that should be something that's possible for others to do as well and have different analyses. I think the prospect of meeting the town's objectives is exciting. I'd love to be behind this project, but I have, concerns and unknowns that, do pose a significant amount of risks, I think, for the town that we're not able to consider yet, or some of us haven't been able to consider yet. The potential for the site appears to be good in a lot of regards. It's a great presentation. I think there was a lot of work that's clearly gone into this. I certainly appreciate that. A lot of people have worked very hard to produce a lot of information and try to give the town a good basis for making a vote. However, I do think we still need to address some concerns, options, and other aspects of the plan. In particular, a more in-depth comparative analysis of what other options might exist to achieve some or all of our objectives, either under the existing developer's plan or under a different plan that doesn't involve the town having to put forth the money and take on the liability of owning the property. I think effectively the taxpayers are being asked to make a choice about making what is, in some regards, a gamble. It could be anywhere from $250,000 to $4 million or more, depending on what your assumptions are about the possible outcomes and risks of the project, for a not entirely certain set of outcomes in terms of the benefits. There are a number of variables that really can widely swing the potential outcome of the project beyond what was shown in the slides, I think. To list a few that I would love to get more information on, so we can either assess them as being real or unreal, unrealistic risks. What the perspective of getting a suitable developer who is willing to meet the proposed plan that we have is, and whether or not they see that as economically viable. We could certainly pursue a number of options around that, trying to see if we could get a letter of intent from one or more developers along the lines of what our proposed plan is. I think we need to consider other variables, like what the actual valuation of the homes would be, as opposed to coming up with potential numbers. I don't know that those are based on a professional assessment. So I'd love to know if that's the case. And we're making assumptions around occupancy rates, the time frame in which the development would occur. Obviously, as the former speaker brought up, a number of school children that would be that we could control being in the development. What the impact on the surrounding real estate values might be, and if those are negative, how that offsets the potential benefit of the project. And there are probably other variables we could consider. I understand it's a very tight time frame you're trying to work under. You're trying to get as much information as you can. And I appreciate that can be challenging. I think we should also consider what the potential impact of making a move in this way, in the way we're exercising 61A versus the other projects that were noted, which were assigned to other groups other than the town buying the property, what that impact would be on other future developments. In other words, how other developers would view the towns, this move by the town, and whether or not that would negatively impact their interest in considering doing other projects here. And then finally, what the impact might be on the town's liability that's associated with owning the property. What liability do we have while we own the property? What are the other potential liabilities in terms of lawsuits related to this particular move, and how we're exercising our rights and using that statute. So that's there are a series of questions. I appreciate the time, and thank you.
Thank you for speaking. I also asked when you get up to speak, not only introduce your name, but your address. Next one, I'm not sure I understand the last name, Jim Manette? Oh, I'm sorry.
So one of the things we'll be able to do is we're trying to keep track of questions, and we'll look at the tape as well and try to respond in a way that's not just you get the answers, but everybody gets the answers.
Hi, my name is Jim Monahan. I'm a land planner and real estate appraiser with LandVest. I have a 20 or 22-year history of planning for the property, and I've appraised it over several different occasions for different uses for the Pirie family. And as part of that appraisal process, you take a very analytical look at existing land use regulations. You create a plan that becomes a financial model by which you value the property. And I have to say, I've appraised the property at intervals where it required a fresh look at the zoning bylaw every 2 or 3 or 4 years. And I did that, and I never envisioned the type of density that's proposed by the town's plan that I've seen, 40, 50, 60 units. The appraisal process is always it's a cost-benefit analysis between the gross revenue you can generate through whatever real estate product you create, and you back out the cost to create those. And in the case of Aquila Farm, it's all, the model has always been a lesser number of highly valued properties with minimal interruption of the landscape and minimal infrastructure improvements required. So it's high net revenue, low approval risk, and low infrastructure costs result in the reason we valued the property over the last 20 years essentially as the 6-lot plan that's on the table right now. And just as a comment on market risk, we marketed the property for about 2 years to a global market, and we didn't get a single call from a cottage developer or from a senior housing developer. And there were no restrictions on the marketing materials that would keep those people away. So, that the issue of the town's interpretation of the existing subdivision density that's achievable under the regulations without any waivers or any special regulatory relief results in a much higher density than if someone taking an objective and very sober reading of the zoning bylaw and subdivision control law would come to. So, my final comment has to do with the town, the timing of the transaction, and, well, actually, just the refinement of the plan. I was out on site with Mark today, and it's the plan that's being illustrated and shown to the public right now is at best a schematic plan, and you admit that it is. But as I said earlier, the plan is the model, and to talk about 40 lots per units versus 50 lots versus 60 lots, those carry huge financial implications. So until you have a really firm model, you don't really know what the value of the property is, and it's a tough. You've been under a time constraint. I understand that, but without a firm plan in place, it's difficult to assess approval risk, and it's difficult to put an RFP together. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. Thank you. The next is John Pirie.
Good evening. My name is John Pirie. I live at 7 Kinsman Lane, and I'm a butter of the property in question. I sort of have 3 points that I want to raise this evening. One, you talked about the traffic study that you commissioned for $7,000 from our taxpayers' coffers, and you said that you saw no issues with the traffic study. Yet I have a copy of the traffic study here, and it suggests that the sight lines both north and south are impaired. It gave it a level of service rating, a failing grade. So if you have a failing grade and level of service and you have impaired sight lines, that should be enough to point that out to the townspeople here tonight, but you chose not to do so. You also chose not to indicate that the measured time delay for a single vehicle to leave that driveway and enter onto Bay Road is 52.4 seconds per car. So if half the people that live in your new 50-lot division want to leave their house in the morning and go to the store, it's going to take them 43.6 minutes to exit the property. Quite frankly, I can get to Boston in 43 minutes. The traffic study also did not address any crosswalks, sidewalks, traffic lights, or other improvements to make it safe for children and senior citizens to use the property. You had an issue with fire access because this will become the single longest dead-end road in Hamilton history, and the fire chief was notably concerned about that. The solution you presented to the fire chief was to take his 35-foot-long trucks and drive them down 14-foot cemetery roads and try and accommodate a 90-degree turn. That's mathematically impossible. So, quite frankly, the fire trucks can't get there. So hopefully you put sprinklers in the houses. The next question that I think is a critical one that's been brought up at several meetings is that in order for you to identify the base yield to calculate what the property maximum density development is, the base yield must be calculated with no waivers put in place. You've chosen to calculate the base yield with every single possible waiver imaginable, including one that's never been granted in town history to this property. And you granted them before you've actually developed the base yield. Next point. We're 85 days into your process. Today was the first day at Mark I've seen you on the property. I walked there with you today, and we walked out to look at where you're going to put 23 units on the northern part of the property. I encourage you to walk out exactly where you want to put the houses, but you chose not to, because it's wetlands. It's completely filled with skunk cabbage, which, as everybody knows, is an indicator of wetland. It's well within the DEP restricted zone and can't possibly be developed. Yet you knew that this morning, but it doesn't reflect in what you're showing us tonight. The last thing I would like to suggest is that if in fact you and your board are absolutely confident that you have a lengthy list of interested developers that would like to purchase this property from you, that you should have no concern about guaranteeing the town a return on this investment. So what I would like to say is I'm going to suggest an amendment to your warrant that guarantees the townspeople a return on this sale so that we don't get left hanging out to dry. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Josh Warner, please. Kevin Bottomley.
Thanks, I'm Kevin Bottomley. I live at 675 Bay Road, and with the exception of the cemetery, I'm probably the biggest abutter to the Pirie property. I have not too much to add from what previous speakers have said. I do like to ask Mark for one clarification. Mark, you said that, just in case anyone is confused by this, that you could issue a bond anticipation note but not pay interest. I assume that the note accrues interest, and you just don't have to pay on the cash.
Not the principal.
Not pay principal, but it does accrue, you have to pay interest. And then annual interest costs, you estimate at $72,000. And that's in all your figures. The second thing is I'm curious if in your financial...
Did everyone hear the question and answer?
I'm curious if in your financial analysis you have made any assumptions on the decline in value and the decline in tax revenue from any abutting property. Because clearly development of this size and scope is not going to add value to any abutting property. Okay. And lastly, I'm a former banker and finance an awful lot of real estate projects, and I can honestly say I've never seen one that tried to mix apples and oranges like this. You have senior housing, you have affordable housing, you have entry-level housing, you have horses, you have soccer fields. I've never known of anyone that tried to put as many different kinds of housing on the same site, and I would argue that the developers who would support such a project are few and far between. Thank you.
Andrew Greer, please.
Hi, Andy Greer.
Excuse me, sir, could you come up to the microphone and introduce yourself and address?
Absolutely. Sorry, I'm actually terrified of microphones. But,
They do it that.
hi, Andy Greer, 824 Bay Road. And I guess I have a fairly simple question, and that is that every time anybody runs into revenue problems, what they want to say is that you can either destroy your community and save your taxes, or, well, that's pretty much our choice. What I see here is that we've got a developer is willing to do something responsible in our community. And it's going to be something that is not overwhelming, not overreaching. It's rational profit for a rational investment. What I'm seeing here is people who are not putting their own money at risk, they're putting our money at risk. Our tax dollars are going at risk for this project. The developer, it's their money at risk. If they screw it up, they lose. If they screw it up, we lose.
Claudia Woods, please.
Would you mind if I talk to them instead of you?
As long as we all can hear.
I'm Claudia Woods, and I wanted to introduce myself because I served on the Pirie working group for the last 3 months. And I went into it with a very objective state of mind. And people would ask me what I thought, and I didn't have an opinion. It was a terrific committee to work on, by the way, and I thank the select board for giving us the opportunity to do it. But about 3 weeks ago, I began to think what I went into had morphed into something very different. When we started, it was a clean slate. What are the possibilities with this land? 86 acres, a mile plus from the center of town. And 3 weeks ago, I said to the committee, this is too much, too soon, not enough homework. I'm uncomfortable with the scale of it. And it was a lonely decision, but that was the decision that I made. I thought I should introduce myself to you. I have written about my experience, and I would be happy to share it with you. I think you need to know that I asked the question of the patent property. Here is a gift. Why don't we put senior housing there? This isn't about wanting senior housing and not wanting affordable housing. This is about a project that I feel is being railroaded. And personally, I care about middle-income housing. I don't want to see us be a rich town only. And yet, this wasn't the way in which we should manage this project. So if anybody wants to talk to me, I'd be happy to talk to you.
Thank you, Claudia. Jack Lawrence, please.
Jack Lawrence, 105 Rock Maple. Mark has said that he does not want the town leaders to act as developers or the town to act as developers, but that's precisely what they are proposing here. And I suggested over 2 months ago that if the town was going to engage in a business transaction, and this is a business transaction, being a developer, then there should be a business plan. To date, and I said that also to the Pirie Committee about 2 weeks ago, to date, there is no business plan. We have a list, a wish list, with a lot of numbers thrown around that don't, frankly, stick to the wall. The fact of the matter is, last week, the Chronicle said 44 units. This week, they said 60 units. The reason given for the increase in the number of units was that it didn't work with the 44. What happens if it doesn't work with the 60? Are we going to 80? Are we going to 100? We're going to have a very different situation in the middle of our historic district. And I don't think that we elected our town leaders to engage in real estate speculation. And I don't think they should. And I'm not going to vote to allow them to do so. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. Susanna, Colorado, please.
I'm Susanna Colorado Mansfeld. I live on Winthrop Street. And I must say I agree they've been very, very thoughtful remarks tonight, and I'm finding them to be very interesting, so I'm not going to go and repeat everything that's been said because I'm not clever enough or articulate enough to do it. But the one thing I wanted to do, because I work with the Essex County Trail Association, and it has been promoted that we want this trail, we want the access of this property for our trail users. And I want to say that it has been an equestrian pass-through. It connects two sides of Hamilton. And it's very, very important for that, because if we lose that, we cut the town in half. But I'm concerned about it being represented as a public trail system, because although we promote walkers and bicycle people and cross-country skiers and dog walkers in our 6 towns that we work in, this would not be a property that would be good for public access on foot or anything else, because I don't know how you access it. You'd have to park at town hall maybe and walk down there, and then you could walk around inside the property on trails that exist, but you will not be able to walk through abutting properties unless you want to bust through the woods and go into the graveyard. You would find a drawbridge going over the Miles River, I would think, from the detour on the other side, because that's not typically been the use of that trail. So I just want to clear that up. Thank you.
Thank you. There are a few more people who signed up. If other people have new comments, or probably might have time for more folks. So next is Harold Lipton.
My name is Harold Lipton. I live at 37 Miles River Road. I was there with my 2 lovely daughters and my wife. We moved to Hamilton over 10 years ago. My daughters fell in love with horses, started as ponies. And I remember over 10 years ago walking to the Pirie Property over Bridge Street through Brackenside and realizing what a wonderful, beautiful property it was, and how delightful it was to live in this town. It has such a beautiful property. And now 10 years later, we are one of the people who have made an offer to buy part of the Pirie property. And a lot of what has been said here today about what the current developers propose to do is simply wrong, because I would be part of the association along with the others who have signed accepted offers, and we know what we are going to do. And the first thing we're going to do, and I guarantee you this, and we've already talked about it, is to guarantee permanent access to equestrians who want to use that trail. Because we're equestrians, the woman who has made an accepted offer on the Sears property is an equestrian. There's a very nice couple who would buy the property in back, the 35 acres with the post and beam. They would love to see horse trails there. They told us that they're going to keep 35 acres in pasture. And so, in fact, what you're going to have, and our plan, just so it's clear, is we're going to take the 2 barns. We would buy the 2 barns, 7 or 8 acres associated with that, and the other parcel, which we would use as pasture. And our plan is to take the antique, beautifully, architecturally important stucco barn and restore it piece by piece using a fine architect and people who are experienced in restoration. And when I hear that your plan is to put 4 condo units in that barn, which I assume will destroy the architectural integrity of that barn, I'm literally appalled. The other big stucco barn we would take and we would preserve as a barn, using it for our horses and other people, neighbors' horses. And then there's a post and beam barn in the back that the people who are buying the back lot would use and leave it just as it is. It's from the 18th century. I haven't heard any mention of that. And that should be historically preserved, and that's what's being proposed. So the proposal that the current developers are going to make, actually there's only going to be 2 houses, new houses built on that. The one in the back, and the person, one of the people buying that, is himself an architect. and there may be one other unit, so you're talking at most about 2 houses being built on that property. It will look exactly the same as it looks now. We intend to make it an equestrian facility where the greenhouses are now. That land would stay in use. We would have a beautiful riding area. There would be trails for people to come by and to see and to walk over Miles River. And that's a beautiful plan which will restore and keep the Pirie property as it was. It pains me as someone who has fallen in love with Hamilton to think that this is one of the most beautiful estates in Hamilton, and your proposal of putting 50 or 60 units in there would simply destroy it. And the idea that equestrians, which my children are, would use a trail that has 50 or 60 units around it and a soccer field with parking lots is just nuts. It will be destroyed as a pass-through for the very important equestrian use it is. For that reason, I hope you will reconsider what you're doing and vote no. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan Heffernan. Good evening, Dan Heffernan, 24 Rock Maple. I've been a resident here for 30 years. I have 2 children that gone through the Hamilton school system. We love it here. We quality of life. My children and I have talked about moving. They don't want to move. I'm not moving. My taxes, yes, they've gone up tremendously from when I started here. But we still stay here. I think there's 2 things we need to look at here. There's the property, and then there's the development. This is an opportunity for the town to get a piece of property that's 1 mile from town, close to the school system, easy access to the road. That's what you need to look at, buying this land, and then coming up with, we have some fantastic people, much smarter than me, that have the ability to come up with a great plan for this property, to make it viable, to make some tax dollars. I think we need to look at the land as an opportunity here. It's an opportunity for our residents, our children, the future of Hamilton. It's 86 acres of land. It's beautiful. I walked out there. Take it as 2 things. Buy the land. This is an opportunity. It won't last long. Secondly, if you want to do the development, then get involved. There's great involvement in this room. Please step forward. I'll step forward. We'll come up with a good plan. We'll make it viable. Thank you very much. Those are all those who signed up except Jim Kresser. You said you were going to take a pass, or? Okay, Josh. Thank you.
Hi there. Sorry for being late. I'm Josh Lerner from Publc Road. So the issue which I just wanted to highlight had to do with really the sort of trade-offs between risk and reward. And in particular, there's been a lot of history of governments playing the venture game, and a lot of them have ended up pretty badly. And if you think about what are the issues and problems, it seems that in many cases there's a lot of excess optimism in terms of how things are going to work out, and then a failure to really think about what the cost can be. This is true in a lot of arenas, but certainly when we look, even in Massachusetts, we don't have to go as far as China or Dubai to see real estate disasters propagated by governments in the name of, with very good intentions of trying to boost growth. And I think here you can see you can certainly see when you look at it carefully, a lot of real risks here in the situation. I think if you look at, sort of what would happen if we were to be in a world where interest rates were to go up, we know that they're in a historic low point at this point. Certainly a lot of very smart hedge fund guys are betting that interest rates are going to go up. What if there's a double dip recession? What if there's just sort of any number of other unforeseen contingencies? What would be the scenario for the town, having made the $4 million expenditure? What would really the downside be? And I think the answer is it could be quite substantial. On the other side, you say, what are really the benefits? And at least if you look at it from a financial point of view, you have to really wonder. You say, you know, yes, there'll be some tax revenues here, but the tax revenues are going to take considerably longer to come than if it's the case that it's sold to a private developer and taxes are paid immediately. Furthermore, you have the issue that there seems to be, you know, there's clearly going to be some costs on the trade. There'll basically be some sort of loss in the transaction there. You know, taking the most optimistic numbers that I could find that the town put together, you look at the benefits over the first 5 years relative to the other scheme. It was somewhere on the order of $39 per household per month. So in other words, you say you've got $3 a month on the one hand, and you have this sort of risk of a huge financial lack hole on the other. To me, that just seems deeply problematic and worrisome. Finally, you say, if the town's going to spend $4 million, and you know, I think we can debate whether government should spend money or government should shrink and just simply spend less money. But if we're going to spend $4 million to promote affordable housing, senior housing, all sorts of other things in town, is this the optimal way to do it? I would say no. I would say it makes much more sense to focus that money downtown, whether it's infills in terms of empty lots, whether it's putting in sewers that might allow more dense development. I think there's a lot of things we could do with that $4 million other than this, which would have a much better risk-reward profile. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Fred Mills. I live on Arthur Ave. And I'm going to talk this way because you're much more attractive than they are. If you've known me long, you know that what I talk about often in my stand-up is about the available entry-level housing stock in our community. I moved here 30 years ago because literally the only house I could afford was in Hamilton. As a working real estate agent, I will tell you that that is harder and harder and harder to do. I love to hear that people are raising their children and they love this town. I will absolutely guarantee you that they won't be able to live here if we continue on doing exactly the same thing we do over and over and over again. We all know what the definition of insanity is, and that is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. If we do nothing to develop entry-level housing in our community, we will continue to turn over land to non-entry-level price points. The advantages of entry-level housing in our town are very clear. And while we can debate the pros and cons of this specific project, there are some facts that we cannot ignore. And one of those facts simply is this is an opportunity, and that doesn't happen very often. We are unable to develop entry-level housing one house at a time and have it have any meaningful effect in our housing stock. This is a chance for us to do something productive for our community in order for it to stay the same. I know it sounds odd, but in order to stay the same, we have to manage a certain amount of change. Change will happen. If we don't manage it, we will not stay the same. We will become increasingly an exclusive community with no opportunity for my children to move back here, and trust me, they'd like to, or really an opportunity for your children to move back here. There's another side of this. And I know I heard from a professor of real estate. You know, I know that those that teach, and those that do. Real estate for me is a life. However, I will tell you that senior housing is not built out in Hamilton. The seniors that live in our community have no place to go. They live here and they like to stay here. Sure, it might be built out in Ipswich, it might be built out in Oxford, it might be built out someplace else. But I am relatively sure that the people that pay for the schools our children currently go to, the people that built the roads that we currently drive on, the people who have sweated and worked and grown this town into what it is today, would like to stay here. They can't, unless they stay in their own home. And if they stay in their own home, then that just further depletes the entry-level housing stock. So the opportunity we have in front of us is either to do something different or to stay on a sort of status quo course where we do nothing at all. Now, it's really easy to look at a plan that had to be, by statute, put together in 120 days and find holes in it. I think any plan that's put together in 120 days is going to have a lot of holes in it. But if we don't do anything, all we will continue to do is lose entry-level housing stock. And I would recommend that we not do that, because if we do that, our taxes will rise and our community will change in ways that we all hope don't happen. Thank you.
We appreciate everybody hanging in there. There's time for 2 or 3 more speakers if you'd like to. Jim, you were on the list originally. And, name and address, please.
Jim Cresser. I own a property at 254 Bay Road. I'm also the attorney for the developer that has this property under agreement. Most of what I have to say you've already heard, so I'll be very quick. There was an initial reference made in the presentation to the Boulders development in Wenham and to the Barrowway property in Ipswich, which were given as examples of 61A exercises of the town's right of first refusal, with a key difference. Both of those properties were developed in response to an assignment of the town's right of first refusal to conservation organizations, which is perfectly appropriate under the statute and would be perfectly appropriate here if there was a will to do it. Wenham and Ipswich took absolutely no financial risk whatsoever in the redevelopment of those properties. Here, you have to buy this property, period. You have to spend your $3.9 million and own it before anything else happens, number one. Number two, there is a website, savehamilton.com, that we have created. There's an awful lot of information that's been presented here tonight. Not all of it's accurate. Maybe not all of our information is accurate, but learn both sides. A great deal of the information presented, particularly about our proposal, was not necessarily accurate. You heard Mr. Lichten correct a couple of misconceptions. Take a look at the website. Third, the concept plans that have been presented here are not really plans. They're drawings. They were assisted greatly, the Pirie working group, in the preparation of those plans by the developers who have a vested interest in obtaining the right to buy this property. In my opinion, the plan that's been presented to you doesn't meet the requirements of the open space bylaw and does not meet the requirements of the subdivision regulations in the town of Hamilton. I don't think it's a plan at all, and I don't think it's viable. Others may have different opinions, but that's mine. Thank you.
One more speaker, please. 2 more.
Evening, everybody. My name is Bill Eaton, and I'm on Bridge Street. I have a question and then a comment that will follow. I'm curious what the assumption of the valuation of the main house would be with the proposed plan versus the current developer's plan. Is there a difference in the valuation? Is there a discount with the proposal versus the existing?
Well, so we have 2 views on it. One is we have a different view of what it's worth standalone as towards the value of what we're saying is coming out of the developer's plan. So when we look at the tax revenue from their side, we're assuming the house alone, not the land around it, is worth $2 million. They're saying in their development plan it's worth $3 million. It's currently assessed at 2.8. It's hard to imagine if it's worth 3, the whole property is going to be sold for 0.9. million above it. So it just seems, their 2.8, or the assessment value of 2.8 or 3 is just, it seems high. And so $2 million is what we're assuming for the footprint. Now, what, in our financial models, what's not here is, one of the plans was, do we sell the main house and pay down the 3.9 million? And our internal working numbers are probably about 1.4, 1.5, 1.6 million, because it's no longer going to be it's going to have this development out in front of it, so we're assuming it's worth less. And then there's also a chance of selling the Sears property house, also at, it's on a 5-acre piece, so, that would be worth, 5, 6, 700, some number for that piece. So what we're doing for our models, for looking at some of the alternatives, is saying, okay, you pay 3.9 for it, you sell the main house for 1.5, you sell maybe 0.5 for that. So you really, the town would be into all the land excluding those two pieces for $2 million. And then suddenly you don't have to come up with 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 total lots. You can, in order to get the money back on it and have affordable and have the trails, the total risk profile is a lot less. So we wanted to show a worst case, because I fight with these guys because they keep saying I'm not aggressive enough, but I tend to be more conservative, so that's the case I showed. So there is.
I'm not sure what the actual acreage footprint would be for the main house. My comment would be, I bought a house on Bridge Street that's one of the old town estates. It's been in the market for years and is not selling for what people thought it was worth. And again, this is an opinion, but my opinion is the reason it's not selling is because there are houses that have been built around it over the years. Nobody wants to buy an estate that has houses around it. No one's going to want to buy an estate that has cluster housing, tucked in the front yard.
Fair enough. So one of the options is that doesn't include this house, that it continues, that you actually put cottages there. But it's a lot easier, it's a better financial model if we sell it at a lower number and lower the basis. It just makes everything else easier.
I don't know the facts here, but I've heard lots of rumors that the estate on Bridge Street has had, people consider putting condos in there, and no one's taken a bite on that either. So, again, it's an opinion. I think that you'd have a hard time moving that. There'd be real risk of losing, some real principle on that piece of the forward. Thank you.
Time for one more speaker. Would someone in the back, please?
Hi, my name is Martin Z. West Valerie, 1028 Bay Road. We've been for 5 years now, so we're newbies. I can't confess to be third or fourth generation. Got some weed here, some gravy, it's my own meeting. I am actually a professional real estate investor. 30 years, I'm a developer, member of the union laborers. Don't want to take this the wrong way, but I'm built to take advantage of it. That's what I do for a living. I'm supposed to do for a living, take advantage of cities, zoning boards, and the like. Don't do it. We actually manage money for Harvard, Endowment, and MIT, but we spend our days with people who do take advantage of it. Now, I've listened to a lot of issues come up today that all they do is raise questions. The math. The developer's plan has $170,000 in tax revenue. Your plan is $470,000 in tax revenue. Yet it's affordable. When you start walking through the math, I did some calculations, that's almost over $500,000 per house. The houses you're going to produce, are they senior housing or are they affordable housing? If they're senior housing, 40 units of senior housing, where are the services going to come from? These people move into these units at an average age of 78 years old with 5 or 6 levels of acuity. They need nursing, they need bathing, they need that. So senior housing, by definition today, is no longer retirement housing. It's no longer independent living. It's typically higher levels of acuity these units cannot afford. If they're affordable housing, have you guys thought through, are they potentially deed restricted? These people buy them the first time, you try to sell them for $400,000 and then flip them later. There's so many issues on the table here. We talk about them not being able to be seen from the road, that they're behind the cemetery. Well, I go to the church across the street, and you can see all the way down the cemetery. And if you're front-end loading this to protect the open, supposedly protect the open space, what happens to the developer who doesn't adhere to design restrictions, which I hope you have, by the way, which will cost you $100,000 to get, because you're going to need an architect to help you negotiate with the developer the design restrictions. And then you need another $100,000 and hire a construction manager to make sure this guy adheres to it. There's so many issues on the table here, and we rush to do this. Now, I am for affordable housing. I bought a building in Los Angeles and gave it to Cedars-Sinai Hospital for nurses. So I'm all for serving the community. But if we're going to do something to create a village, then I think the gentleman back said it most aptly, then eminent domain, everything behind all the stores in downtown, take it over, build high-end mixed, not high-end, high-density mixed-use projects, walkable to train, and serve the community with new retail and new apartments, and you can do actually senior housing project there. Eminent domain, use your powers in an effective manner to build your village someplace it belongs as opposed to in the middle of the street. So by the way, the chances are probably higher that turning into a blighted thing you see in the street than not achieving your objectives. Now, if you want to buy the property to serve the public good for sports fields, let's call it a day, circulate tax, whatever it's called, we'll chip about $100, and you buy and create new sports fields and leave it open. But this fallacy of trying to, you guys play developer. I've seen developers. You ain't developers. I'm not trying to mean. You're well-intended and trying to do the public good, but you're outgunned because the guy you bring in here with RFP or RFQ is going to give you a clock.
Using one more, Peter. Gerda, did you want to speak? And then I think that we'll wrap this up.
Peter Bordeaux, 416 Bridge Street, and I'd like to start by saying thank you to the people who have put in an awful lot of time to make this evening possible. Whether you agree or disagree with the committee's conclusions, I think there's a lot of people who have spent a lot of time trying to represent the town's interests, and I think you deserve some thanks. Second, I want to speak to the athletic field need in town. There is an acute need. Some of your proposed solutions do help that, but just to the extent that it should be stated, Hamilton Youth Lacrosse rents fields at Pingree at Gordon College, and we benefit from a private landowner here in town who graciously lets us use his land. But there are no town fields for us to use. I think that that's a problem that needs to be addressed in town, whether it's here or in another place. My third point is that I think if you were to acquire this property, history would eventually look kindly on that decision. I remember my father chaired the site selection committee for middle school. They spent 12 to 18 months searching through all the parcels in Hamilton and Wenham. They couldn't come up with one suitable parcel. They ended up with the high school. The next time you need a parcel like that, it won't exist. You know, if you develop this one, it won't exist either. But I throw that out there as something for you to consider, that if this is something the town could acquire as a long-term resource, perhaps you should consider that. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
We're done. So the next decision for us will be on Thursday when we will talk about these issues. We'll circulate answers to some. We'll put them on this website. It probably makes sense to have them all consolidated in one document so that people don't have to see answers for one person and answers for the other. So we'll address the ones that had questions. We'll try to address them. We won't be able to hit some of the conjecture that people have one way or the other, but we'll certainly try to take a good honest stab at sort of replying to a lot of good questions that people have.
Thank you all for coming out tonight. We appreciate hearing from you.